And I want to start by posing this question to you. And it's, is conflict good or bad? And while we typically think of conflict because, if we're honest, it makes us uncomfortable, we typically think of it as being bad. I'd actually argue that conflict itself is neutral. It's a sign that something has become an issue, whether it's a communication breakdown or a process breakdown. And conflict is a signal that presents us with the opportunity to address this issue before it becomes a bigger issue. I would like to move it more from general conflict into the structure of a biotech that you might be familiar with, especially when it comes to forming teams. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about is team conflict, right? Team formation is going to go through a set of stages of forming and then a really exponential change of storming. When things then start to stabilize and the relationships in the team start to become more understood, you're going to get to a norming phase. And then finally, you're going to get to that optimal output phase of performing, right? When essentially everyone's doing their part, everything's going well, and the output is strong. This is going to be a cycle as new members join the group. And especially in these forming and storming stages, conflicts are going to arise with team members and with team leaders. So that brings us to conflict resolution. And conflict resolution is essentially just a method to settle disputes between two or more parties. And it's a broad umbrella. There's a lot of different options. But you might have seen this before. We'll use this as our basis for strategies, the Thomas Kilmann model, and it separates different conflict resolution or conflict management strategies into 5 main buckets, if you will. There's avoiding, where no problems are going to be resolved. You're avoiding the issue. You don't get the main problem resolved, but you aren't necessarily creating more problems. Accommodating, where you are essentially giving into all the demands or requests of the other party in the conflict. Competing, where you strive to get all of your demands or needs met in the conflict over the other party. Compromising, which is where you can't really get a solution where everyone's going to get everything that they want, but you strive to work together so that everyone gets a little bit of what they want, and you try to prioritize that people get what they want the most. And then there's collaborating, where you try to work together with a creative solution where everyone's able to get their needs or requests met, even if it's not necessarily how they originally foresaw it. When you look at this, you might think, oh, collaborating is going to be the gold standard. This is what you want to strive for. Not necessarily. I want to say that all of these exist as strategies that you can use, and it'll depend on the situation and the other party which one you choose. For example, avoiding might seem like a very poor conflict management strategy, and in most cases it is. But in cases where it's a very, very small conflict and it's not affecting anyone's personal happiness, it's not affecting the processes or the work, and where bringing the conflict to light and discussing it might create more problems, then in those rare cases, avoiding might be the strategy that you choose. And the 2 main aspects that you'll need to be able to apply all 5, you're going to need to be assertive, and you're going to need to be able to foster cooperation. I want to tell you a little bit about how you can work to be more assertive in conflict. Assertive does not mean aggression. It simply means that you're making your position clear. So a good practice is to state how the situation makes you feel, but don't cast blame. Don't start using you statements. You did this and it made me feel this way. Instead, try I statements. So something like, I feel like this when this happens. And it's less confrontational, but it still states why you feel wronged in the situation. Acknowledge any truths that are in accusations. So if you've been missing a few deadlines and someone says, you're missing deadlines and it's making my work harder to do, acknowledge it, but avoid getting defensive, which we'd say is more aggressive. So saying, well, I missed this deadline because I needed this from you and you didn't get that to me on time. But also not overly apologetic or passive. So not saying, I know, I feel bad, I'll never do it again. If you really want to resolve the conflict, you need to get to the root of what is causing the conflict. And don't be afraid to suggest options for resolution. Don't feel like you need to agree with the resolution that the other party is bringing up. You can suggest your and defend your own. And then cooperation is that other key aspect that you'll need to be able to apply all 5 strategies. Some strategies to maximize cooperation in your discussions: to redirect the conflict as a mutual attack. So you're working together on solving this problem that has arisen for both of you, rather than reducing your conflict to going back and forth attacking the other person. You can also use active listening strategies. This shows the other party that you're listening to their words. And in fact, you can repeat some of what they're stating to you, essentially for clarification, using their own words. If someone says, for example, "I feel disregarded when you overlook my work," you can reflect back that fairly accusatory statement in a way that not only essentially slows the conversation a little bit, if that emotionally has hit you a little bit, it gives you time to also process it and keep the conversation steady, but also shows them that you've heard them. So you can say, "So I'm hearing that when I did, this, you saw that as me disregarding your work and that hurt you, correct?" And then take the conversation from there. Keep it in a sympathetic listening tone. And also signal that your words and actions that you want to work together. The thing that will break down conflict resolution the quickest is to lose trust or respect in the other person. That is essentially a no-go situation at that point. And one of the main things I want you to consider in conflict to keep that trust and respect is that it's okay to adjourn your discussion and save it for another day if you feel yourself becoming very defensive or emotional. That could lead to more of a attack on the other person, which could lead to them losing that trust and respect for you, or vice versa. Just some other techniques to try, both in these scenarios and in your work. Try to avoid absolutes when discussing the other party's behavior. So don't say things like, "You always do this," or "You never do this on time," or "You only do this when," because that doesn't necessarily show that you've been paying attention to any of the positive behaviors. It shows that you see all of their actions as this very negative impact on you. Try to evaluate solutions from a neutral perspective as much as possible. It's standard nature to either see yourself in a conflict as the victim or the hero, but try to keep neutrality. Keep the focus on the problem at hand without focusing on past issues. When a conflict gets really emotional, especially if you're feeling accused, it's easy to slip into bringing up things the other person has done, but focus on resolving the conflict that was brought to you, build up that trust and respect, and then use that later as a way to start to resolve some of these past issues as well. But keep the focus on the initial problem at hand and try using those I statements that we mentioned rather than you statements, which can be very accusatory or at least be taken that way.